For so many people, faith is a source of incredible comfort, a real guide through life. But what happens when that same faith becomes a source of deep, tormenting anxiety? That's what we're going to get into today. We're breaking down a condition called scrupulosity. It's what happens when a person's sincere moral or religious beliefs get completely hijacked by fear.
Just try to imagine that for a second. You're a parent, you love your kids more than anything, and this thought just flashes into your mind. This isn't some line from a horror movie. It's the actual gut-wrenching experience of someone with scrupulosity. And let's be clear, these aren't thoughts they want to have. They're intrusive, they're horrifying, and they feel totally opposite to who the person truly is. So what on earth is going on here? The person having these thoughts, they usually believe they're in the middle of a huge spiritual crisis. They feel this crushing guilt and shame, and they're convinced they must be a truly bad person. But the most important question we have to ask is this: are we looking at a failure of faith, or are we looking at a treatable medical condition? And the answer, thankfully, is really clear. Scrupulosity is a recognized form of obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD. This isn't a spiritual failing, it's about brain circuitry. The topic of the obsessions might be religious or moral, but the engine driving it all is pure OCD. And realizing that, well, that's the absolute first step to getting better.
Now, here's something that's so important to understand. The thoughts themselves aren't the actual problem. Seriously, research shows pretty much everyone has weird, unwanted, or bad thoughts pop into their head. If you don't have OCD, a strange thought pops in, you go, whoa, that was weird, and you just move on. But a brain with OCD flags that exact same thought as incredibly dangerous and important, and it triggers this massive, dramatic overreaction. Okay, so how does that one little overreaction turn into this whole debilitating cycle? Well, OCD operates on a very predictable and very powerful four-step loop. Once you understand this loop, you can start to see how to break it. It all starts with an obsession. That intrusive thought, maybe something like, did I just commit a mortal sin by accident? That thought creates this massive wave of anxiety and doubt. So to get rid of that awful feeling, the person performs a compulsion, like praying for hours until it feels just right. And for a moment, they get this little bit of relief. But here's the trap. That relief teaches the brain that the compulsion worked. It basically superglues the obsession and the compulsion together, making the whole cycle even stronger the next time around. And these compulsions, they can take all sorts of forms. From the outside, it might even look like extreme piety, but it's totally driven by fear. We're talking about repetitive prayer that has to be absolutely perfect, constantly going to a pastor for reassurance, mentally replaying every single thing you did all day to check for sin, or even avoiding church altogether because it just triggers the obsessions. And this brings us to the really cruel paradox at the heart of OCD. Every single attempt the person makes to get better, to feel more certain, to be a good person, it actually just feeds the disorder and makes it stronger. See, at its core, OCD isn't really a fear of sinning. It's an intense, almost pathological intolerance of uncertainty. The brain is basically screaming for a 100% ironclad guarantee about spiritual things that, by their very nature, require faith. It's demanding proof where proof is literally impossible, and that's what keeps the anxiety going 24/7. This comparison here just nails the difference between a healthy faith and a compulsive behavior. Looking for information is normal, right? You ask a question to learn something. But reassurance seeking is a compulsion. You're asking the same question again and again and again, not to get information, but to get a temporary little hit of relief from your anxiety. You're not looking for an answer, you're looking for a feeling. And what's so tragic is that people with the best intentions, loved ones, friends, even clergy, can get pulled right into this cycle. It's a thing called symptom accommodation. When a family member or a pastor gives that constant reassurance, they really think they're helping. But what's actually happening is they've become a part of the compulsion, and they're accidentally keeping that OCD cycle spinning. Okay, so we've seen how the trap works, and it sounds pretty awful. So how do you get out? Well, it takes a totally radical shift in strategy. You have to move away from fighting the thoughts and toward changing your entire relationship with them. The natural instinct, the thing that feels completely right, is to fight back. You want to argue with the thoughts, push them down, analyze them, and just wrestle them into submission. Sufferers feel like they have to do this, to prove to themselves and to God that they don't really mean these horrible thoughts. But that approach, it's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. The new goal, the one that's backed by decades of research, is completely the opposite of what you'd expect.
You have to learn to let the thoughts just be there without fighting them. The goal isn't to change the thoughts themselves, it's to change your relationship with them. So, the two gold standard treatments for this are exposure and response prevention, or ERP, and acceptance and commitment therapy, which is called ACT. ERP basically involves letting yourself have the obsessive thought on purpose while you resist the urge to do the compulsion. With ACT, you learn skills to just detach from the thoughts, to see them as nothing more than mental noise, like static on the radio, and instead focus on living a life that's guided by your values, not by your fears. I love this old proverb. It's often attributed to Martin Luther, and it just captures this new approach perfectly. You can't stop the thoughts from flying through your mind. Those are the birds. But you can choose not to engage with them, not to feed them, and not to build them into something more. You can choose not to let them build a nest. So, what does recovery actually look like in the real world? Well, it's probably not what you think. It's not about finding some magic trick that makes all doubt disappear. It's about building a more resilient, a more authentic kind of faith. This right here is such a practical tool for loved ones. Just notice the difference. The unhelpful response tries to solve the uncertainty. It says, "Don't worry, it's not a sin," but that just feeds the compulsion. The helpful response, validation, acknowledges the feeling without getting into an argument with the thought. Saying, "Wow, I can see how much that distresses you," gives real support and connection without becoming another gear in the OCD machine. So the real goal of treatment isn't to get to a place of 100% certainty. That's OCD's goal, not a human one. The real goal is to develop what we call psychological flexibility, the ability to live a rich and meaningful life that's driven by your values, even when doubt and anxiety are along for the ride. It's about learning to walk forward with the uncertainty. And that leaves us with this really profound idea, a whole new way to think about faith. Maybe true faith isn't that comfortable, cozy feeling of being absolutely certain about everything. Maybe true faith is the courageous act of choosing to move forward, to trust, and to live right in the very heart of the storm of uncertainty.